Person den Rechten.
La cantante de más de 200 ans a perdu 2% de la
Rechten Teil an der Nordseite, sowie des Außenbereichs
de la population idéale et sexuelle.
Moving forward.
What are mobile methods and why do we need them? I really like this statement by Georg Simmel. He says the rainbow persists despite the constantly changing position of its water particles, and reality too is in restless flux made in and through movement. We might not be able to see that directly, but it's there and it's important. And in this video from the BBC series Britain from Above, you see daily rhythms made and reflected in taxi runs. Through the night and early in the morning, the taxis use the main thoroughfares, but then as the rush hour kicks in, they start to use rat runs and small side streets fan out. And that rhythm and the movement that you see, the blocked movement and the stillnesses, they are making reality, and they are experienced and studied, or they can be experienced and studied when riding along with the taxi drivers. But they can also be studied by moving yourself away and taking a bird's eye perspective. And both these are mobile methods. Mobile methods and debates about them are not new, and that's important to realise. Here you have Margaret Mead and Gregory Bateson, two famous anthropologists, arguing in the 1930s. They're gossiping about a colleague, and Mead says to Bateson, "You said she'll never be a photographer. She keeps using the camera to look at things. You don't. You always use the camera to take a picture, which is a different thing." "Yes. By the way, I don't like cameras on tripods just grinding." "You don't like that? Disastrous. Why?" "The photographic record," he says, "should be an art form." And Mead says, "Why? Because if it's an art form, you're actually altering the reality that you document." And he says it's undoubtedly altered. And she is concerned about that and says, if you're going to be scientific, you mustn't do that. You must record from far away and a shot of what's really happening. And he says, no way, you should actually follow the action as it's happening. And they have this big argument. So this should feel quite familiar to people who are thinking about mobile methods, really, because it's quite a frequently rehearsed dispute. I'm with Bateson. If you move with your object of study, then you can document and understand what's happening and document the production of social order from within. And talking about Jean Rouche's video ethnographies, Douglas Macbeth, for example, argues that it's possible to capture the making of social order from within, in part through also documenting your own orientation within the field. And I'd like to show you an example from my own fieldwork, where I'm running around, and you have to realize that it's quite noisy. A generator is going, and it's a surprise exercise, emergency. A chemical train has collided with a school bus, and it's the on-duty staff are called to this incident, and of course they realize that it's not a real incident, but they take it very seriously and try to organize an emergency response. And I'm there following around how do they organize an emergency response in a field like that. And I think that using a mobile camera and moving around with the research subjects actually reveals how roles and responsibilities are actively and reflexively performed. In this case, also in and through embodied interaction in the space, which also broadcasts assessments of risk in a very chaotic environment. So it's quite a powerful method. And mobile video ethnography is one of a whole huge range and growing range of mobile methods, reaching from surveys sent to people's mobile phones, also related to the location that they're in, to doing interviews on the move, walk-alongs, ride-alongs, or also design interventions like the Copenhagen Wheel project, where people put environmental sensors on the bikes that people ride through the city. And there are too many methods to go into great detail, trying to summarize them all, and there are too many researchers to name them all, and I don't want to offend anybody. But if you're looking for inspiration, a good starting point is the Mobilities Journal, where people document their research and mobile methods. And there have also been 2 edited collections of mobile methods and mobile methodologies so far. And this kind of lively innovation in mobile methods is necessary because the mobilities Simmel revealed as constitutive of social, material, political, economic orders at the turn of the last century have multiplied and intensified. World citizens travel 23 billion kilometers each year by air, road, rail, and our virtual mobilities have increased and are even more staggering. In just 1 hour, Facebook has over 5 million status updates and 10 million tweets are sent around the world. And traditional methods are not enough to adequately study the fleeting, distributed, multiple, complex, the sensory, emotional, spiritual, kinesthetic aspects of this, which are very important. One area where innovative mobile methods and mobilities research are sorely needed is privacy. More than a decade ago, Scott McNealy, then Cisco CEO, said, "You have zero privacy anyway, get over it." Quite flippantly, but he was also serious about it. And here we are, more than 10 years later, still trying to amend hopelessly outdated privacy regulations and access rights and data protection laws. This is no match to how thoughtlessly people handle personal data, how they move physically and virtually without concern about leaving traces in databases everywhere, and how sophisticated data processing tools have become, like face recognition technologies that can recognize people and that are now connected also to Facebook pictures that people upload. And of course, here too, there are historical precedents. 200 years ago, people were very worried about electricity and the total surveillance that the nights lit up by electrical light made possible. But today, the scale of transformation and the ripple effect of these kind of transformations and effects on privacy management that this has on civil liberties are of a different order. Because every move we make, every communication we engage in has the potential to leave traces, creating not visible shadows, but invisible data shadows. And they are invisible, they're distributed, and access is distributed, access is fleeting and invisible. So I agree with John Uri, that when he says that the most important things today are the invisible things. And this erosion of privacy and control over personal data is one of those invisible things that I think is very important. And you might think, I don't care, I've got my Facebook profile and I leave my loyalty card points and it doesn't really have any effects. Zero privacy doesn't really feel that bad, especially when it means more personalized advertising, more personalized services, and more security as well. But the consequences can be serious. In Jean-Charles de Menezes' case, the consequences were fatal. He was wrongly identified as a terrorist based on personal data that had been processed and that highlighted him as a suspect. And becoming a false positive may seem a remote possibility to you, but given the amount of data that's being processed, even if the rate of false positives is 1%, which is a statistical, very likely number, 18,000 people could be identified as suspects every day. This is a figure given by Mark Solovey. Being concerned about this is good. Doing something about it is even better. And mobile methods, mixed methods of following people but also following the information, allow us to study how people are struggling to control personal data, such as their location. And this is an example that Christian Likop and Yoriko Inada studied. They looked at how Japanese people appropriated a game called Mogi, which you hunt treasures in the city and get points for it. But it makes your location, it needs your location to be able to show you the treasures, and it makes your location also available to other players, which then suggests, if you are in the same place, then you should perhaps meet, but you don't really know these people. They just also play the game. So they show the really awkward negotiations that people get into to avoid physically meeting those people. So here you've got a conversation where player A sends a message to player B saying, "Oh, you're really close," and then she goes, "Sweat, yeah, we really are." And then a few minutes later, he says, "Oh, you ran away," and she says, "Yeah, I had to get onto the Manucci line, onto the tube." So what you see there is how people are developing a sensitivity to their invisible data shadows and the broadcasting of personal information and the effects that this can have. And they show how intensely emotional and social this is. Studies of mobile living like this, using mobile methodologies to reveal otherwise quite hard to see complexities, opportunities and dangers, are critical to stay on top of the transformations that are happening and the consequences that these have for people's lives, of these quite disruptive innovations like personal data processing. And an analytical orientation towards studying mobilities, immobilities, blocked movements can help us gain an understanding, a deep comprehension of the practices and implications of zero privacy through studies like Inada's and Likop's. And quoting Hannah Arendt on this from her book, The Origins of Totalitarianism, may seem overly dramatic to some, maybe. But I think that the kinds of data processing that we are collectively bringing into being by shopping with credit cards, by moving with GPS, the transformations to what it means to be human, what it means to be human, that this entails, and the utilization of such data for security are a burden that we should shoulder more consciously and carefully. And mobile methods make that possible. The question that I would raise to people is, how can you study privacy across different intersecting mobilities? And how can you make the insights that you're gaining through that count in innovation? and change.
Seite sowie den Außenbereich den rechten.